Daniel Vale had learned that silence came in different kinds. There was the peaceful silence of rain settling over the glass roof of his farmhouse, the uncomfortable silence of a military briefing before bad news, and the very specific silence made by an old man realizing that something enormous had just crashed into his forest. He stood beside the kitchen window with a cup of coffee halfway to his mouth, watching a pale blue streak burn across the night sky. It vanished behind the black line of trees, followed 3 seconds later by a deep impact that rattled the dishes and caused his maintenance robot to fall sideways into a bucket. "Excellent," Daniel muttered. "Either the universe has sent me treasure, or my insurance premium is about to become a religious experience." The robot released an offended beep from inside the bucket. Daniel pulled on his weather coat, retrieved the plasma rifle he had sworn never to use again, and stepped into the storm. Rain hissed against the rifle's heated barrel as he followed a trail of broken branches and glowing soil deeper into the forest. 15 years had passed since he had worn a uniform, but his body still remembered how to move quietly, how to scan shadows, and how to distrust anything that fell from space without asking permission. The crater appeared beyond a ridge, wide and smoking, its center occupied by a smooth black pod shaped like a seed. No markings covered its surface, only thin silver lines that pulsed with a slow rhythm. Daniel crouched behind a tree and studied it. "You look expensive," he whispered. "That usually means dangerous." The pod answered with a soft musical tone. A section of its hull unfolded like a metal flower, releasing a cloud of cold white vapor. Daniel raised the rifle. Inside, surrounded by dim violet light, lay 2 infants. For several seconds, he could only stare. The babies were wrapped in reflective cloth, their pale blue faces almost human except for the delicate length of their ears. One slept peacefully. The other had both eyes open and was gripping the edge of the blanket as though she had personally survived the crash through stubbornness. Above each tiny wrist floated a ring of golden symbols, rotating slowly in the air. Daniel lowered the rifle. "Oh no," he said. The awake infant blinked at him. "No, absolutely not. I am retired. I grow vegetables, bad vegetables, but still." The child sneezed, and every silver line on the pod flashed at once. Somewhere beneath the floor, a mechanical voice spoke in a language Daniel did not recognize. Then the second infant began to cry. The sound was small, frightened, and painfully ordinary. Daniel climbed into the pod before he had time to argue with himself. The air inside smelled of ozone and burned metal. A transparent panel near the cradle showed a star map filled with warning icons, most of them red. Another screen displayed a massive alien vessel breaking apart under weapons fire. Daniel could not understand the text, but he understood the images. Someone had launched this pod in desperation. Someone had expected it to carry these children far away from something terrible. He reached for the crying infant, and the golden symbols above her wrist suddenly expanded around his hand. His old military implant sparked beneath his skin. A sharp pain traveled up his arm, followed by a burst of information too fast to comprehend. Coordinates, voices, a woman screaming, 2 names repeated like a prayer. Lyra, Elian. Daniel stumbled back, nearly dropping the child. The awake twin made a sound that was suspiciously close to a laugh. "Very funny," he told her. "You nearly turned my nervous system into soup." The pod trembled. A red light began flashing, and the mechanical voice repeated a phrase with increasing urgency. Daniel had heard enough countdowns in his life to recognize one in any language. He wrapped both infants in their silver blankets and hurried out of the crater as the pod sealed behind him. He had reached the tree line when a silent pulse of blue light spread across the forest. The pod collapsed inward without an explosion, shrinking into a glowing point before disappearing completely. Only a circle of glass remained where it had rested. Daniel stood in the rain, holding two alien babies against his chest while steam rose from the crater behind him. One child had stopped crying. The other was chewing thoughtfully on the collar of his coat. "This is kidnapping," he said weakly. "Or adoption, possibly treason. I'll need a larger dictionary." Above the clouds, far beyond what his eyes could see, something answered the pod's final signal. A single golden beacon awakened in deep space, transmitting the location of the lost royal bloodline to anyone who still remembered how to listen. 15 years taught Daniel that raising alien twins was not dramatically different from raising human children, except that human children rarely disrupted gravity when annoyed. Lyra had done it first at the age of 4, after being told she could not eat glowing mushrooms from the irrigation field. Every spoon in the kitchen had risen to the ceiling and remained there for 3 days. Elian, more patient and therefore more dangerous, had learned to manipulate the farmhouse doors by humming at them. Daniel discovered this when he returned from repairing a solar fence and found every door opening and closing in sequence, while both girls sat innocently at the table. "The house is haunted," Lyra had explained. "The ghost likes rhythm," Elian added. Daniel had stared at them for a long moment before saying, "Then the ghost can clean the bathroom." Now, at 15, the sisters had become tall, graceful young women whose pale blue skin appeared almost silver beneath the colony's white sun. Their long ears tapered elegantly through thick dark hair, and their eyes carried faint rings of gold that brightened whenever their emotions rose. Daniel had taught them to hide those details beneath thermal scarves and cosmetic projection patches whenever traders visited. The colony was distant, but not forgotten, and forgotten places often attracted people who preferred not to be remembered. The farmhouse stood between rows of stubborn red corn and wind turbines that groaned like elderly animals. Daniel liked the isolation. Lyra did not. "There are exactly 42 people within walking distance," she complained one morning while repairing a drone at the kitchen table. 31 are over 60, 6 are children, 4 smell like engine coolant, and 1 is father. Daniel looked up from his coffee. "I'm honored to have my own category." Elian leaned against the counter, carefully slicing fruit with a narrow field blade. "You also smell like engine coolant. That is the fragrance of responsibility." "It smells expensive," Lyra said. Beneath their jokes, unease had entered the house. For weeks, small pieces of machinery had behaved strangely around the twins. Irrigation sensors turned toward them as they passed. Navigation screens displayed star systems no colony map contained. At night, Daniel heard a low vibration under the floorboards, too regular to be plumbing and too patient to be harmless. He had searched the cellar twice and found nothing but tools, preserved food, and the old service robot he had dragged home from military surplus years ago. The machine had not moved since its power core failed a decade earlier. That afternoon, while a dust storm gathered beyond the northern hills, Lyra found the hidden panel. She was chasing a loose power cell that had rolled beneath a storage shelf when the floor flashed gold under her hand. Silver patterns spread across the concrete, forming the same spiraling symbols Daniel remembered from the escape pod. His chest tightened. "Step away from it." Lyra obeyed at once. Elian came running from the workshop. The three watched as the floor separated without a sound, revealing a narrow chamber beneath the cellar. Cold blue light poured upward. Inside stood the old service robot. Its dented body had changed. Dust slid from polished black armor that had somehow formed over its frame, and a crown-shaped sensor unfolded from its head. The machine's dead eyes ignited with golden fire. Daniel raised the pulse pistol he kept hidden behind the shelf. "Don't move. That command is logically incompatible with my activation," the robot replied in flawless standard. It stepped from the chamber, examined Daniel, and bowed deeply to the twins. "Princess Lyra, Princess Elian, Royal genetic signatures confirmed. Silence filled the cellar. Lyra slowly turned toward Daniel. You said it was a farming robot. It was terrible at farming. Father. In my defense, it was also terrible at being royalty. The robot lifted its head. Emergency guardian absent. Imperial succession compromised. 15-year concealment protocol complete. Elian's face had gone still, but the golden rings in her eyes burned brightly. Who are we? The machine projected a vast hologram across the cellar. Stars unfolded around them, followed by an enormous palace orbiting a violet planet. At its center appeared the image of a woman with long ears, pale blue skin, and a silver crown. She looked older than the twins, yet painfully similar to both. You are heirs of the Valorian throne, the robot said, daughters of Queen Seraphine. Daniel felt the room narrow around him. He had always known the day might come when the girls asked where they truly belonged. He had simply expected more warning, perhaps a letter, or at minimum a polite knock at the door. Above the farmhouse, the storm suddenly changed direction. Every communications tower across the colony turned toward the sky. Far beyond the atmosphere, hidden drives awakened one after another, and a royal fleet began its final descent. The first battleship appeared at dawn, descending through the dust storm like a city falling from heaven. Its black hull stretched across half the sky, layered with silver armor and rows of blue lights that pulsed in perfect rhythm. Then came a second ship, a third, and dozens more, emerging from folds in space with flashes of white fire. Their gravity engines pressed against the atmosphere until windows trembled, and the red corn bent flat across the fields. Daniel stood on the farmhouse porch with his pulse pistol hanging uselessly at his side. Behind him, Lyra and Elian stared upward, their long ears uncovered for the first time in years. I assume these are not fertilizer merchants, Lyra said. Their parking technique is too aggressive, Daniel replied. Across the colony, emergency sirens began screaming. Neighbors rushed from their homes carrying hunting rifles, mining lasers, and one antique cannon that had not worked since before Daniel retired. Governor Hallen's voice crackled through every public transmitter, ordering citizens to remain calm in the same tone people used when they were personally nowhere near danger. The Royal Service robot walked onto the porch and extended a small antenna from its head. Valorian Royal Fleet confirmed. Daniel glanced at it. You might have mentioned the fleet was large enough to create its own weather. You did not ask. I also did not ask you to become useful after 15 years. The largest vessel stopped directly above the farm. A circular section of its underside opened, releasing a column of pale light. Within it, armored figures descended without ropes or engines, held aloft by controlled gravity. They landed in absolute silence across Daniel's field, more than 100 soldiers in silver armor, each carrying a narrow energy spear. Their faces were almost human, though their long ears rose through openings in their helmets. None pointed a weapon at the farmhouse, but none lowered one either. Lyra stepped closer to Daniel. Elian's fingers closed around his sleeve. He felt that small gesture more sharply than the arrival of an entire armada. A final figure descended alone. The woman wore polished armor beneath a flowing white mantle, and a thin silver crown rested above her pale blue forehead. Her long, dark hair moved gently despite the still air. She landed several meters from the porch, surrounded by a shimmer of golden symbols. For one suspended moment, no one spoke. The Queen looked at the twins as if 15 years of grief had suddenly taken physical form before her. Her composure broke first. She removed her crown with trembling hands. Lyra, she whispered. Her gaze shifted. Elian. The twins stood frozen. Daniel had imagined this meeting many times after discovering the escape pod, but imagination had been kinder. In his mind, there had always been explanations, gratitude, perhaps tea. There had never been a queen surrounded by warships. "I am Seraphine Valor," the woman said, forcing strength back into her voice. "Your mother." Lyra glanced at Elian. Elian glanced at Daniel. The queen noticed. Pain moved across her face, brief but unmistakable. "You were taken from me during the Night of Ashes," Seraphine continued. "The palace was attacked. Loyal guards placed you in an escape vessel before the Western Tower fell. We searched every system, every trade route, every unregistered colony." The robot beside Daniel raised one hand. "Technically, this colony is registered." Daniel looked at it. "Not now. Accuracy remains important during reunions." The queen's eyes settled on Daniel. "You found them." It was not an accusation, but the soldiers behind her shifted slightly. Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between the armed formation and the porch. "I found 2 babies in a crater during a storm. The pod was collapsing. There was no message I could understand, and no one to contact. You concealed royal heirs. I raised children who needed food, shelter, and someone willing to explain why licking power cells is a bad idea." Lyra folded her arms. "That happened once. It happened 3 times. The third was scientific confirmation." A faint sound passed through the royal soldiers. Daniel realized, with some surprise, that several were suppressing laughter. Queen Seraphine looked at her daughters again, absorbing their voices, their posture, the ease with which they stood beside the human. She climbed the porch steps slowly and stopped an arm's length away. "Come home with me," she said. "Your people have waited 15 years. Elian's golden eyes brightened, but she did not move. "This is our home." The words struck harder than any weapon. Seraphine's breath caught. Lyra stepped beside her sister. "We want to know you. We want to understand what happened. But we are not leaving Father." Every helmet in the field turned toward Daniel. He wished briefly that the ground would open and accept him. The queen studied his weathered face, then the girls holding tightly to his arms. Above them, battleships darkened the morning, yet the greatest force on the field was the quiet certainty in the twins' voices. Seraphine placed the crown back upon her head. "Then," she said carefully, "we have more to discuss than I expected." The royal discussions began at Daniel's kitchen table because the farmhouse possessed no throne room, diplomatic chamber, or furniture designed to survive the weight of 7 armored generals. Queen Seraphine sat opposite him with perfect posture while 2 guards remained beside the doorway, each holding an energy spear taller than the ceiling. Lyra poured tea. Elian placed a plate of biscuits between them. The nearest guard stared at the biscuits as though they might contain explosives. "They are safe," Daniel said. "Mostly." The guard's grip tightened. "Father burned the first batch," Elian explained. "Those became defensive weapons," Lyra added. Seraphine's mouth moved slightly, almost forming a smile, but the expression disappeared when one of her advisors activated a hovering star map above the table. The Valorian Empire spread across the room in blue light, hundreds of systems connected by golden lines. At its center burned the violet world of Valor. "The princesses must return before the next orbital cycle," said Chancellor Oren, a narrow-faced man whose silver robe seemed designed to disapprove of everything. "Their survival changes the succession. Without their public recognition, rival houses will challenge the throne." Daniel leaned back. "You found them this morning, and already someone wants to use them as political furniture." Oren's long ears stiffened. "They are royal heirs. They are 15. Both facts can be true," Seraphine said quietly. Her gaze remained on the twins. "The Empire has been unstable since they vanished. Some believe I invented their survival to preserve my rule. Others claim their bloodline ended that night." Lyra rested her hands on the table. "And what happens if we return?" Orin answered before the Queen could. "You will undergo genetic confirmation, historical instruction, diplomatic preparation, ceremonial purification, strategic education, and formal presentation before the assembly." Elian blinked. "Do we sleep during any of that?" "Sleep is scheduled." Daniel looked at Seraphine. "Your empire schedules sleep only during ceremonial weeks. That may be the first convincing argument against monarchy." A short laugh escaped one of the guards. Chancellor Orin turned sharply, and the soldier immediately became fascinated by the wall. Seraphine finally allowed herself a faint smile, though sadness remained beneath it. "Daniel, I do not intend to steal them from you. Your fleet is blocking the sun." The admirals considered that a gesture of respect. On this colony, it usually means rain or invasion. Outside, royal soldiers spread across the farm with disciplined efficiency and no understanding of agriculture. 3 attempted to scan a wind turbine for hostile intelligence. Another surrounded Daniel's tractor after its engine backfired. The service robot followed them, loudly announcing corrections to their posture. Through the window, Lyra watched an elite guard lose a struggle against a mechanical gate. "Should we help him?" Elian asked. "No. He insulted the hinge." For the first time since the fleet arrived, Seraphine laughed openly. The sound surprised everyone, including the Queen herself. It vanished when a warning symbol appeared inside the hologram. A red pulse moved along the edge of the system, too brief for the others to notice. But Daniel saw it. So did Seraphine. Their eyes met. "What was that?" he asked. Orin dismissed the projection at once. "Residual interference." Daniel's old instincts returned, cold and unwelcome. Interference does not move in formation. Seraphine stood. The guards raised their spears as every light in the farmhouse flickered. Outside, the sky darkened, not from the royal ships, but from a distortion spreading across the upper atmosphere. A voice burst through the fleet channel, sharp with alarm. "Unidentified vessels emerging beyond the moon, weapon signatures concealed." The Queen's expression hardened into command. "Defensive formation. No fire unless fired upon." Daniel moved toward the cellar, where his military equipment remained sealed behind an old biometric lock. Lyra caught his arm. "You said you were finished with war." "I also said the roof would last another 10 years. I have a poor history with predictions." Seraphine followed him to the cellar door. "Those ships may belong to the faction that took you from me," she told the twins. "If they know you are alive, they will not allow you to reach Valor." Elian's golden eyes brightened. "Then we do not hide." Daniel opened the weapons locker. Inside rested his retired combat armor, scratched and dull, but still functional. "You will do exactly what I say." Lyra folded her arms. "That sounds suspiciously like hiding." "It is called tactical obedience." "Is that different?" "Yes. Hiding has less paperwork." A deep vibration rolled through the farmhouse as something struck the royal shields above the colony. Cups shattered. The guards rushed outside. Through the cellar window, silver ships turned toward the stars, their engines igniting like artificial suns. Seraphine placed one hand on Daniel's armor. "You protected them for 15 years. I was planning for something less complicated than an interstellar coup. You kept them alive." Daniel looked toward the twins, who stood together beneath the golden glow of the awakened robot. Fear was present in their faces, but neither stepped back. Beyond the atmosphere, unknown warships opened their weapon ports, and the peaceful colony became the center of a conflict that had crossed 15 years of darkness to find them. The first enemy strike hit the upper shield with enough force to turn morning into white fire. Every window in the farmhouse flashed, the walls groaned, and Daniel's old combat armor locked around his body with a sequence of metallic clicks he had hoped never to hear again. The suit recognized his nervous system, restored tactical displays across his vision, and immediately informed him that his left knee joint required maintenance. "Wonderful," he muttered. "The galaxy is ending, but at least my armor remains committed to criticism." Outside, the royal fleet rose through the atmosphere in disciplined layers, silver battleships forming a vast shield above the colony. Beyond them, dark vessels unfolded from cloaking fields near the moon. Their hulls were thin and angular, without markings, carrying weapons designed to leave no survivors and no witnesses. Queen Seraphine stood in the farmyard beneath a projected command sphere, issuing orders to admirals scattered across orbit. Lyra and Elian remained beside the awakened service robot, both wearing emergency armor generated from silver bands around their wrists. The armor fitted itself to their bodies like flowing liquid, forming pale plates over their shoulders and chests while leaving their long ears uncovered. Daniel pointed toward the underground shelter. "Inside. Now." Lyra looked toward the burning sky. "You taught us not to abandon people. I also taught you to listen when someone with more combat experience starts using short sentences." Elian raised one eyebrow. "You usually use short sentences when the tractor breaks." "The tractor has tried to kill me more often than most soldiers." A violent pulse struck the northern field. Soil erupted into the air, and 3 enemy drones descended through the shield breach, their black bodies surrounded by rotating blades of energy. Daniel fired before they touched the ground. His rifle released a narrow beam that split the first drone through its core. Seraphine destroyed the second with a golden arc from her gauntlet. The third rushed toward the twins, only to stop in midair when Lyra lifted both hands. Gravity twisted around it. The machine folded inward with a protesting shriek and dropped into the corn like crushed metal fruit. Daniel stared at her. "Shelter." "I helped." "You disobeyed efficiently. That is still disobedience." Elian touched the side of her helmet, listening to transmissions no human implant could detect. "More are coming from the western ridge." She turned toward the colony. "They are not targeting the fleet. They are targeting the civilians." Daniel's tactical display confirmed it seconds later. Enemy landing craft were descending toward the settlement, avoiding military positions and aiming directly for homes, generators, and evacuation routes. The strategy was cruel and obvious. Force the queen to divide her protection, then isolate the princesses. Daniel opened the colony channel. "Governor Hallen, move everyone into the mining tunnels. Seal the surface entrances after the last transport." Hallen's frightened voice answered through static. "The tunnel lifts are offline." "Then use the cargo crawlers." "Those are 40 years old." "So am I, and apparently I'm still considered operational." Daniel transmitted coordinates to every civilian vehicle, farm drone, and construction machine within range. His armor linked them into a crude defense network. Tractors rolled from fields carrying shield projectors. Harvest machines formed barricades across the main road. Irrigation towers turned their pressure cannons toward the sky. The royal generals watched in disbelief as agricultural equipment reorganized into a battlefield formation. "Human military doctrine?" Seraphine asked. "Human farming," Daniel replied. "The difference is mostly paperwork." Enemy troops landed near the settlement, but the colony met them with mining lasers, magnetic nets, and one ancient cannon that Governor Hallen had claimed was decorative. It fired with a roar that shook dust from every roof and sent an enemy transport spinning into an empty grain silo. "I knew that thing worked," Daniel said. "You called it useless," Lyra reminded him. "I was motivating it." The twins moved together across the field, their abilities strengthening each other. Lyra distorted gravity, dragging hostile drones from the air, while Elian projected shimmering barriers that bent plasma fire harmlessly into the soil. The service robot followed them, announcing, "Royal posture inadequate," each time they ducked. "We are being shot at," Elian snapped. "Etiquette remains essential under pressure." A blast struck the robot and spun its head backward. It continued walking. Orientation temporarily ceremonial. Even Seraphine laughed, though tears of fear brightened her eyes as she watched her daughters fight. Daniel saw the expression and understood that the Queen was not judging their skill. She was seeing 15 lost years in every movement, every shared glance, every instinct they had learned without her. Then the enemy commander revealed himself. A black-armored figure descended onto the ridge, carrying a weapon shaped like a broken circle. He aimed it at the twins, and the air around them began to freeze. Daniel recognized the field immediately, a royal blood suppressor, designed to disable Valorian genetics. He ran before thought could slow him. The weapon discharged. Daniel threw himself between the beam and the girls. His armor screamed as alien energy tore through its shielding and hurled him across the field. He struck the ground hard enough to lose his breath. Through blurred vision, he saw Seraphine unleash a wave of golden force that shattered the commander's weapon and sent the enemy troops retreating toward their ships. Lyra and Elian reached Daniel together. "Father!" Their voices carried more terror than the battle. Daniel forced his eyes open. "I'm fine." His armor displayed 6 critical warnings. "Your suit says otherwise," Lyra said. "My suit is dramatic." Above them, the Dark Fleet began withdrawing, but not before transmitting a final message across every channel. The voice was cold, distorted, and familiar to Seraphine. "Bring the heirs to Valor," it said. "The throne will become their grave." The Queen looked toward the stars, her face stripped of all uncertainty. The attack had failed, yet the war had only opened its eyes. Daniel regained consciousness beneath the blue light of a royal medical chamber that had been installed in his barn. For several seconds, he watched silver instruments drift above him, rearranging themselves with quiet precision, before noticing Lyra asleep in a chair beside the bed and Elian sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. Queen Seraphine stood near the doorway, still wearing damaged armor. "How long?" Daniel asked. Lyra woke instantly. 6 hours. That is barely a nap." Elian rose and crossed her arms. "You stopped breathing twice." Then it was an ambitious nap. Neither twin smiled. Daniel pushed himself upright despite the sharp protest from his ribs. The medical chamber projected an image of his body, highlighting 3 fractures, internal burns, and a military implant that had fused with traces of Valorian energy. The royal physician ordered him to remain still. Daniel ignored him with the confidence of a man who had survived both warfare and raising 2 teenagers. "What did we learn from the attacker?" he asked. Seraphine activated a hologram above the bed. The black-armored commander appeared, his face reconstructed from battlefield scans. He was older than the Queen, with a scar running from his temple to the edge of one long ear. "Lord Maelor," she said, "my former regent. He led the palace coup 15 years ago." The hologram changed, revealing fragments recovered from the twins' original escape pod. A hidden recording had survived inside the service robot's memory core. The room darkened as the image of a burning palace formed around them. 2 royal guards ran through smoke carrying infant twins while explosions shook the corridor. Behind them, Seraphine's younger voice screamed through a communication channel, ordering them to reach the launch chamber. Daniel watched the guards place the children inside the pod, lock its navigation toward distant human territory, and remain behind to hold the door against approaching soldiers. The recording ended with one guard touching the pod's hull. "Find someone who will love them more than power does," she whispered. Silence settled over the room. Seraphine lowered her head. "They were not abandoned." Lyra's eyes shone with tears. "They saved us." "And Daniel completed their mission," Elian said. The service robot standing near the medical equipment raised one finger. For historical accuracy, I also contributed. Daniel glanced at it. You slept in my cellar for 15 years. Strategic inactivity. You were used as a shelf. An essential logistical function. Even Elian laughed, though she quickly wiped her eyes. Seraphine approached Daniel's bed. Mailer believed the girls died in the escape. When my fleet activated the pod's beacon, he learned the truth. The hologram shifted again, showing the Valorian capital surrounded by rival warships. He has seized part of the assembly and declared the twins impostors. If they do not appear before the throne within 3 days, he will be crowned protector of the empire. Daniel studied the map. And if they do appear, he will try to kill them publicly. Your political traditions need improvement. Chancellor Oren entered the barn with 4 advisors and the expression of a man arriving to make everything worse. The princesses must depart immediately. The human cannot accompany them. Lyra's grief vanished beneath anger. The human has a name. His presence would weaken your claim. The assembly will see him as evidence that you have been shaped by a lesser culture. Daniel raised a hand. Before this becomes insulting, I should mention that our lesser culture built the cannon that destroyed one of Maelor's transports. Oren's ears stiffened. This is not humorous. That is why you are losing the room. Seraphine dismissed the advisors with a look, but Oren remained. Majesty, the law is clear. Royal heirs belong to Valor. Elian stepped beside Daniel. We are not possessions. You are the future of the Empire. Then the Empire can learn better manners, Lyra said. The Queen looked at her daughters, then at the human who had raised them. Duty pulled at one side of her face, gratitude at the other. If Daniel comes, she said slowly, the noble houses may refuse to recognize you. If he stays, Lyra replied, we refuse the throne. Oren inhaled sharply, as though someone had fired a weapon in the barn. Daniel swung his legs from the medical platform. No one is refusing anything while angry. You cannot even stand, Elian said. Daniel stood, swayed, and caught the edge of the chamber. Temporary disagreement with gravity. Seraphine moved to support him, but he steadied himself. The girls should see where they came from. They should know their people, but they choose what happens after that. Oren stared at him. A farmer does not dictate royal succession. Good. I retired because I dislike meetings. The Queen stepped forward and faced her advisors. Prepare the fleet. Daniel Vale will travel with us as guardian of the heirs. Oren's expression hardened. The assembly will never accept a human within the royal family. Seraphine's eyes turned cold. Then the assembly may explain why a human protected its princesses while its nobles tried to murder them. Outside, engines began to awaken across the fields. Silver transports rose through the clouds, carrying soldiers, supplies, and the remnants of the colony's strange defense machines. Daniel watched Lyra and Elian stand together beneath the open sky, no longer hiding their ears or the gold in their eyes. For 15 years he had feared the day someone would come to take them. Now he understood that the greater danger was not losing them to another world. It was allowing that world to decide they had never truly belonged to him. Valor filled the forward window like a violet jewel wrapped in war. Silver rings circled the planet, each holding cities, shipyards, and ancient weapons aimed toward the royal fleet. Mailer's vessels waited between them in black formation, their engines burning red against the stars. Daniel stood on the bridge beside Lyra and Elian, wearing repaired armor that still complained about his knee every 12 minutes. Queen Seraphine faced the holographic display as enemy transmissions flooded the chamber. The assembly has sealed the throne hall, she said. Maelor intends to force a public coronation. Daniel studied the defensive grid. Then we should attend. It would be rude to miss a family event. Lyra looked at him. Your plan involves something reckless. That accusation has become very popular lately. Instead of attacking the capital, Seraphine broadcast the recovered recording from the escape pod across every Valorian channel. The image of the burning palace appeared above cities, military stations, and noble estates. Millions watched the loyal guards save the infant princesses, while Mailer's soldiers closed in. Then Daniel's farm records followed. 15 years of medical scans, school lessons, ridiculous birthday celebrations, and one humiliating video of Lyra floating every spoon in the kitchen. That was classified, she said. History demands sacrifice, Daniel replied. The broadcast broke Mailer's control over half the fleet. Captains who had believed the twins dead turned their ships away from his formation. Soldiers lowered their weapons. Yet Mailer activated the planetary defense rings, threatening to destroy the capital unless the assembly crowned him. Seraphine's fleet could not fire without killing thousands. Daniel saw another path. The old service robot had identified a maintenance passage beneath the throne platform, built centuries earlier for machines and apparently ignored by anyone important. At last, Daniel told it, your years as furniture have prepared you for greatness. I accept your delayed recognition. They entered the capital through a freight tunnel while the Queen's ships distracted the defense grid. Daniel, the twins, Seraphine, and 12 guards crossed corridors lined with living crystal and statues of rulers who looked too serious to have ever enjoyed breakfast. The robot criticized each statue's posture. By the time they reached the throne hall, Lyra was laughing despite the alarms. Mailer stood before the assembly beneath a crown of black metal. Hundreds of nobles watched from floating balconies as Daniel's group emerged through the floor behind him. You, Mailer said, staring at Daniel. The primitive who corrupted the heirs. Daniel raised his rifle. I prefer father. It has fewer syllables. Mailer triggered the royal blood suppressor hidden inside the throne. Golden energy tore through the chamber, forcing Lyra and Elian to their knees. Seraphine collapsed beside them. Daniel felt the Valorian energy fused into his implant ignite beneath his skin. The same bond that had nearly killed him on the colony now allowed him to enter the throne's control field. He crossed the chamber through waves of pain while Mailer watched in disbelief. You have no royal blood. No, Daniel said, gripping the throne's core. I only changed their blankets, treated their fevers, taught them to read, and spent 15 years pretending I knew what I was doing. He tore the control crystal free. The suppressor died. Lyra and Elian rose together, their eyes blazing gold. They did not kill Mailer. Instead, Elian sealed him inside a gravity cage, while Lyra projected the escape pod recording above the assembly. His own commands, preserved in the palace archives, exposed the coup and the murders that followed. One by one, the nobles turned away from him. The defense rings powered down. Across Valor, the war ended not with a final explosion, but with millions of weapons becoming silent at once. 3 days later, the twins stood before the restored assembly. Seraphine offered them formal recognition as heirs, but Lyra spoke first. We accept our heritage. We do not surrender our family. Elian took Daniel's hand. The man who raised us will not be treated as an embarrassment. The assembly resisted until Seraphine reminded them that Daniel had saved the princesses, the colony, the capital, and several nobles who had spent the entire crisis hiding beneath reinforced tables. A new title was created before sunset, Guardian Father of the Royal House, Protector by choice rather than blood. Daniel accepted only after confirming the position included permission to return to his farm. Months later, the farmhouse stood beneath a quieter sky. Valorian transports visited the colony, human traders crossed into the empire, and the old service robot became royal ambassador to agriculture, despite knowing nothing about crops. Seraphine often stayed for dinner without guards, learning the years she had missed through stories instead of reports. Lyra and Elian divided their time between Valor and home, preparing to rule without forgetting how to repair drones, drive tractors, or insult Daniel's cooking. One evening, he watched them arguing over whose turn it was to clean the kitchen, while royal battleships glimmered beyond the clouds. Once, he had believed fatherhood meant protecting them from every world that might come to take them. Now he understood it meant teaching them to face those worlds and trusting that love would give them a way back. "Father," Lyra called, "the robot says royal heirs do not wash dishes." Daniel smiled and lifted his coffee. "Tell the robot royal heirs can sleep in the barn." From outside came the machine's offended reply, followed by the twins' laughter, and the sound filled the house more completely than any crown ever could.